Bleak House by Charles Dickens.
Let's get to know the author of Bleak House. Charles Dickens was a British novelist, journalist, editor, illustrator, and social commentator who wrote such a beloved classic novel as Oliver Twist, A Christmas Carol, Nicholas Nickleby, David Copperfield, A Tale of Two Cities, and Great Expectations. Charles Dickens was born in Portsmouth on 7 February 1812 to John and Elizabeth Dickens. At the age of 12, his father was sent to prison for debt in 1824. Following his father's imprisonment, Dickens was forced to leave school to work at the bootblacking factory. After 3 years, he returned to school, which had allowed him to begin his literary career as journalist. Dickens edited a weekly journal for 20 years, wrote 15 novels, 5 novellas, hundreds of short stories, a non-fiction article, lectured and performed reading extensively. He was also an indefatigable letter writer who campaigned vigorously for children's rights, for education, and for other social reforms. Dickens' literary success began with the 1866 serial publication of the Pickwick Papers. Within a few years, Dickens had become an international literary celebrity, famous for his humor, satire, and keen observation of character and society. The Bleak House was inspired by the death of his father and separation from his wife. It was to say that Dickens' novel began to express a darkened worldview after the bad event his experiences. In Bleak House, published in installments from 1852 to 1853, he deals with the hypocrisy of British society. It was considered his most complex novel to date. Dickens died because of stroke at age 58 on June 9, 1870 at Gates Hill Place, his country home in Kent, England. Dickens was buried in Poets' Corner at Westminster Abbey, with thousands of mourners gathering at the beloved author's gravesite.
So, as for the summary of the novel Bleak House by Charles Dickens, the term Bleak House refers to different houses, the one owned originally by John Jarndyce, to which Ada, Esther, and Richard come to live with him, and to the second Bleak House, built for Esther and her husband at the end of the book. That said, the bleak houses in Bleak House are not bleak at all. They are happy houses. The title of the book is more indicative of the social ills and hypocrisy that Dickens addresses on it.
So, moving on to the next part, we have Characters of Bleak House by Charles Dickens. The first character is Esther Summerson, who is the narrator and the protagonist in the story. Esther is an orphan who becomes the housekeeper at Bleak House when she, Ada, and Richard are taken in by Mr. Jarndyce. Everyone loves Esther, who is selfless and nurturing, and she becomes the confidant of several young women. Although she eventually does find her mother, circumstances prevent them from developing a relationship. At first, a hesitant, insecure narrator, Esther's confidence in her storytelling grows, and she controls the narrative skillfully. Next, we have Mr. John Jarndyce, who is Esther's guardian and master of Bleak House. Mr. Jarndyce becomes the guardian of the orphans, Ada and Richard, and takes Esther in as companion for Ada. Generous but uncomfortable with others' gratitude, Mr. Jarndyce provides a warm, happy home for the three young people. When Esther is an adult, he proposes marriage, but he eventually rescinds his offer when he realizes she is in love with someone else. Mr. Jarndyce has sworn off any involvement whatsoever with the Jarndyce and Jarndyce lawsuit. For the next character, we have Ada Clare, who is a ward of Jarndyce. She is a kind, sweet, and naive person. Ada becomes Esther's closest confidant and greatest source of happiness. She falls in love with Richard, and although they eventually marry and have a baby, she never finds full happiness with him because of his obsession with the Jarndyce and Jarndyce lawsuit. Next, we have Richard Carstone, who is also a ward of Jarndyce. He is affable but lazy. Richard cannot decide on a career and seems to have no passion for a particular field. Eventually, he becomes obsessed with the Jarndyce and Jarndyce and ultimately sacrifices his life for the lawsuit. He pursued the suit for Ada's sake, but never succeeds in proving a real home for her. Moving on to the next character, we have Lady Dedlock, who is the mistress of Chesney Wold, married to Sir Leicester, and Esther's mother. Lady Dedlock, revered and wealthy, has kept the secret of her illegitimate child throughout her life, believing the child died at birth. She reveals her true identity to Esther, but is wary of pursuing a relationship because she believes Sir Leicester's reputation will suffer. When the truth threatens to come out, she runs away, certain that Sir Leicester will hate her. She dies outside a cemetery. For the last character, we have Sir Leicester Dedlock. He is the master of Chesney Wold. Sir Leicester is a strong, respected man who ultimately withered and weakens because of Lady Dedlock's disappearance. Fully willing to forgive her, Sir Leicester does his best to find her, but he is too late.
Next, moving on to the themes. So, the first themes are the bad parenting and society. Bleak House is filled with bad parents. Esther's aunt, which is Lady Dedlock, Mrs. Jelby, the breadmaker, and Mr. Turveydrop, to take some examples, all abuse, neglect, or generally use their children for selfish reasons, thus quenching the happiness and development of those children. This poor parenting, in turn, creates disillusioned and disenchanted children, thus perpetuating the original neglect or abuse. In this way, bad parenting undermines all of society. Indeed, to take the theme one remove further, Dickens suggests that England is in a permanent state of bad parenting, with the parents, the government, the courts neglecting, abusing, or generally using the children, the people of the England. Next themes are the weather and society. Throughout the novel, Dickens consistently identifies human moral or subjective states with the weather. This, like the other grotesque elements of his style, is done with a greatly exaggerated panache. Thus, Dickens begins the novel in a deep London particular fog, signifying the foggy confusion of the court of chancery. Or, to take another example, Lady Dedlock is often shown in the rain, which signifies her deep and unending boredom and sorrow. The mud and the cold too often emphasize the evils of urban life, and their inescapability mirrors the corruption of the society at large. Naturally, Dickens' sunny days occur when things are cheaper and cheery, such as when the young people first arrive at Bleak House. Moving on to the last themes, which is England's orphan. Continuing the metaphor of the English state as an absent parent, the most egregious form of parental abuse presented by Dickens is captured in Joe, and often, though he is shown occasional kindness, the overwhelming theme of Joe's life is that he belongs nowhere. People are constantly telling him to move on. The state, which must act for him in local parentage, give him two options: to live on the streets or in the workhouse. That is to say, to choose between death by neglect and death by abuse. Joe's disease state and the manner in which he spread his disease throughout society caps his role as living metaphor for the failure of the English social system. Joe himself, a victim of disease, spreads disease further, thus perpetuating the ill visited upon him. He is the bleakest soul in Bleak House and Dickens' most trenchant social text.
Moving on to the setting. This novel consists of two settings. The first one is time setting. This story happened in the middle of 19th century. Next, we have the place setting. The first one is Chesney-Wold. Chesney-Wold is the Lincolnshire estate of Sir Leicester Dedlock, function as the symbol of great wealth, power and privilege. Next, Bleak House, located in Hertfordshire, owned by Mr. John Jarndyce. Last but not least, Tom All Alone's, the forgotten slum that literally covered with oozing garbage and excrement. It is a dark street avoided by all decent people.
So that's all from Group 4. Thank you.